Hey guys, what's up? Blue here again, giving you guys Zane's updated deck profile. So we did Zane's his original Cyber Dragon deck, the season 1 one. We did it a while ago. A couple things have changed since then, so we just want to go through it one more time to show you guys some of the changes that we made to remove cards that weren't really played and to add cards that were played that were not around at the time, or just were not in his deck. So again, this is going to be Zane's his season 1 deck, the 7 Stars arc. A few cards from season 2, but generally because the deck was so consistent between the 2 seasons, it really seems like he had the one deck, and there are other cards we didn't see until season 2, or new cards in season 2. But the way the GX decks always seem to kind of roll is that they have a deck and they add to it. But it's season, we're considering a season 1 deck. It's, especially in season 2, we see a Cyberdark deck. We do have that deck profile as well. We did that not too long ago when it came out. So we're redoing the first one. We already have the second one, so we have 2 Zane decks. So first up, Cyber Barrier Dragon is one of the variants to the Cyber Dragon. Can only be special summoned with the effect of Attack Reflector Unit, which is a trap card that requires you to tribute 1 Cyber Dragon. Special summon this from the hand or the deck. 800 attack, 2800 defense makes it a fantastic defense. The downside, though, is that the card has to be in attack position to use its effect, which negate 1 attack from your opponent. And it's a once per turn effect, so it really does not make it worth it unless you can protect it in other ways, or they only have 1 attack per turn, because otherwise, you get 1 attack negation and it only has 800 attack, so it's very vulnerable. It's really better just as a defensive wall. Next up is the star of the show, 3 Cyber Dragons. So, pretty lethal on its own with 2100 attack, 1600 defense, and the ability to special summon itself if your opponent has a monster and you don't. So similar to Fiend Mega Cyber, which required your opponent to have 2 or more monsters than you do, except the trade-off is that with 100 less attack, you have to have no monsters, but they just need to have 1. You can drop this one, normal summon something, and potentially right there just go into a fusion. So yeah, Cyber Dragon, we really know what it does. It is the main thing in his deck, and it has the whole archetype built around it. Next, 2 Cyber Kirin. It helps with Power Bond. With 300 attack, 800 defense, this monster offers very little to the deck for anything other than its effect. But anyway, pretty cool little guy. Just would be nice if he had been able to offer more on the field and not just his effect. Cyber Laser Dragon, so the counterpart to Cyber Barrier Dragon. He can only be special summoned with the effect of Photon Generator Unit, which requires you to tribute 2 Cyber Dragons, special summon him from the hand, deck, or graveyard. So you could reuse him, or you could just toss and pull him back. And he lets you destroy a monster on the field with an attack or defense equal to or higher than his own attack of 2400. So it means you can get over anything that you couldn't get over with him attack-wise. Him and Cyber Barrier, the downsides being that they can only be special summoned. If they were attributes, but had the special summon as a bonus, they might be more worth it, because otherwise it takes you 2 or 3 cards just to summon them, making them each in total a 3 or 4 card combo. And the effects don't really pay for themselves, because he can only destroy something that is equal to or higher, so you can't get rid of something weaker that's pesky. And the other one, Cyber Barrier, can only defend using his effect when he's in attack position, when he's vulnerable. So you can't have him as a 2800 defensive wall and negate attack. So I guess the argument could always be balancing, but how strong are these really anyway? Next up is also 3 Cyber Phoenix. Now, this is not a card that we saw used in threes, but like a lot of other cards in a lot of other decks of ours, we increase the copies, A, for consistency, B, to help fill the deck to 40, because very few characters actually play 40 unique cards. And that very few being generally the main character of each series, and then, maybe his rival, and then one of his friends, if even. But Cyber Phoenix is great support in the deck, that he can negate the effects of spells or traps that target machine type monsters, so he can protect them. So it's similar to the machine type Lord of D. And then when he's destroyed, you can draw a card, but destroyed by battle, and he has to be in attack position, so you can't really just set him face down, draw a card like, say, a card trooper. He has to be in attack mode to get the effects, but they can be very helpful. So, and again, even when he's gone, you still get an effect from him. The last monster in the deck, Proto Cyber Dragon, again, 3 copies, giving his deck a total of 6 Cyber Dragons, potentially. Unlike Cyber Harpy Lady, these do have to be on the field to be counted as Cyber Dragon, so you can't use them in the deck as Cyber Dragon. But when they're on the field, you now have extra Cyber Dragons to make, because this deck is very fusion heavy, and Zane's main strategy, like a lot of GX characters, is completely revolved around his fusions, specifically Cyber End. He power bonds to Cyber End to go for game, and that's been his MO, and that has also been what has cost him. But so Proto Cyber Dragon, 1100, 600. So again, on the field, offers very little, attack or defense wise, but the effect to make a Cyber Dragon, while preserving, the true Cyber Dragons, which have 2100 attack, that's what it can be useful for, aside from being extra machine. So it has overall has 1,000 attack and defense less than the real Cyber Dragon. But again, it gives you more to make fusions easier, or if you want to spare an actual Cyber Dragon to make a fusion, so you have the real Cyber Dragon plus fusion. So definitely, a great card in the deck, any Cyber Dragon deck. Now, a quick aside about Proto Cyber Dragon is it was actually introduced in Season 2. It makes its debut episode 65. So at this point, Zane's working off his defeat from earlier in the season, and he's doing a lot of underground duels. And before he gets his Cyberdarks, he's going through his whole, his struggle thing that he lost, and he keeps losing, and then he goes through a bit of a character change. But, so, Proto Cyber Dragon comes from Season 2. There's only a couple cards from Season 2. So again, we're counting it as a Season 1 deck, but there's cards we either just didn't see until Season 2, or were added in Season 2. But overall, his deck, maintains the same structure. So we have no reason to really split it up into a Season 1 and the Season 2 Cyber Dragon deck, and then have a Season 2 and also a Season 3 Cyberdark Dragon deck. So the Season 2 deck for Cyberdarks also goes into Season 3. Again, it's not like the original anime where we saw, bigger differences, I think, between seasons of decks. In GX, we kind of see one deck throughout the season, and then go into Season 2, we see a switch or a trade-off. That's how we're rolling with it. That's how, we're interpreting it. So we're not always making, a deck for someone where they've only changed a handful of cards. So for this, we have 4 cards from Season 2. So it's a Season 1 deck, or a Season 1 plus. Some of our decks you'll see have a little plus sign. That just means that, they run over from a single season, but not to the point where we want to make it a hybrid, not to the point where we make 2 decks for them. But yes, this is all of his monsters now. We've removed stuff that we didn't actually see get played, like Kaiser Glider, Cyber Soldier Dark World. They're really cool monsters. I wish we could have kept them, but they were ultimately not played. So we wanted to cut them from the deck to use cards that were really, we saw in games. So on the spell cards, first up, Battle Fusion. A card actually played, unlike some other characters like Virtual Tristan who have it to replace some cards he had. This was definitely played in GX though. And very much like Honest, except that it's obviously a spell card, quick play. So you activate this card when an attack is declared involving a fusion monster you control and an opponent's monster. So there's a lot of words on there that kind of just say when your fusion's involved in a battle. It gains the attack of the opponent's monster. So it can pretty much get over like anything because whatever they have, whatever they're packing, you just add it on. And if you look to our tournament, you can see me do this with a Cyber Twin Dragon and really get its top attack way up there. And it does say attack, not original attack, so you can use that to your advantage as well. The one setback is that you only activate it one per turn, which is fine, totally fair. That's great. Nothing that I'm gonna sit here and critique, like the, say, Barrier Laser Dragons. So, Battle Fusion is a great trump card. Also one in Jaden's original Heroes deck. Creature Swap. Another card we definitely saw come from Season 2. So again, it wasn't in the original deck, but Proto Dragon was, so we figured we would add in a few more cards from Season 2. Just to kind of balance out the way we have. So, Creature Swap. You switch a monster with on your field and your opponent's field. They get to choose the one on their field, but you still can just, play this whatever to your advantage. So even if they have two monsters, if they have two good monsters, they just have to pick which one would maybe hurt them the least. But you can take, like, say, a Cyber Kieran, give it to your opponent, throw an attack position, and then just kind of screw them. But yeah, so definitely an advantageous card if you use it right. Next up, because this was not in his original version, Cybernetic Fusion Support. So very costly, you have to pay half your life points. But if you make a fusion summon during this turn, you can use fusion monsters from your field, hand, or graveyard. So it's really helpful with Power Bond or Polymerization because those will only let you use it from the field or the hand. This lets you go to the graveyard. But to pay half your life points, I mean, you really got to make sure this play is worth it. Especially if you have, if you were to say Power Bond a Cyber End Dragon with this card, you better hope you win. Or have Cyber Kieran. But yeah, so it definitely lets you make more fusions because you can take from the graveyard. Otherwise, all the cards in this deck to make fusions already do work from the field or the hand. So it's just the, allowing you to use the graveyard as well. But, again, that can be the difference between winning and losing the duel. Diffusion, and we have two of them. Again, the deck is so fusion heavy, and because Diffusion only lets you take back fusions pieces from your graveyard. So if it's your opponent's fusion monster, you can defuse it, but they will not get the pieces back. So this works as a defensive card as well. So you could make a Cyber End, defuse it, and then attack with your 3 Cyber Dragons. Or you can use it on an opponent's fusion monster, which there are so many of in GX, and then just kill it. They don't get the pieces back. So, again, great offensive or defensive card in this deck and in the GX duels. Different Dimension Capsule. It gives Zane a way to search cards from his deck if he can hold off the 2 turns to get it. Future Fusion. Really powerful card. So, dump cards from your deck that list on a fusion type monster. So if you're doing one of your Cyber Dragon fusions, you have to take 2 or 3 Cyber Dragons. You cannot use Proto, it does not work in the deck. If you take Chimera Attack, you have the small problem that Chimera Attack blows up the field when it's summoned, and this card has to remain on the field. If it's destroyed, so is the fusion. So it's really not good with Chimera Attack unless, the keyword's unless you have a way to make Chimera Attack in your hand already, in which case this card can dump everything in the graveyard, and then you can use Overload Fusion or a combination of Poly or Power Bond and, fusion support to then make it right there. So it could work, to thin your deck as well. Again, if you have the Chimera Attack fusion, because then you can toss out just monsters you don't want to draw. Make a Chimera Attack right now using this as bait, but otherwise it's really only good for the Cyber End or Cyber Twin and not Chimera Attack. Limited removal. Because when you're overly powerful, Cyber Dragon fusions are not overly powerful enough. And you need to just double their attack because, well, why not? Monster Reborn. Mystical Space Typhoon. So, we do not have one of these in his Dark World deck. And, you know, a lot of people said he'd use MST. It's like, well, you watch the games that he used MST in his original deck. So he has in this deck. He did not have MST in his Cyberdark deck. You know, we were going through all the episodes, and we were surprised to not see it there. But this same deck has MST. The Cyberdark deck does not. So, you know, it's unfortunate for his deck because it just can't get around spells and traps, unlike this one. But the other one is strong enough and does have, you know, its own ways around some various situations. So here's Overload Fusion. Pretty much used specifically for Chimera attack because it can only make a dark machine type fusion. Again, Season 2 card, because we saw Chimera attack start in Season 2. Very similar to a card that Nesbit played. That was what he used to make Perfect Machine King. It pretty much did what Overload Fusion does, but more ambiguous as machine types, not necessarily dark machine types. So it's not a completely new card in the anime. We saw something similar in the virtual world. Again, we don't have Perfect Machine King as a fusion, so there's no need for that card. We could see it for other reasons, but with Overlord Fusion, again, it's limited to, in this deck, Chimera attack, you know, because of the dark attribute. But now Overlord Fusion also uses from the field or graveyard. So like I've been saying with Future Fusion, if you dump everything in Future Fusion, you can then scoop it right out with Overlord Fusion. But if you use Cybernetic Fusion support, with this card, you now have the option to use your hand as well. So, Cybernetic Fusion support lets you, you know, with this card, lets you use in your hand now, or if you use Power Bond or Poly, it lets you use in the graveyard as well. But either way, this deck has a lot of ways to make fusions because it was so focused exclusively on fusion summoning. 2 of the Photon Generator unit. So again, that's for Cyber Laser Dragon, and it lets you take from the graveyard as well. Barrier does not have that luxury. Barrier can only come from the hand or field. Sorry, Barrier can only come from the hand or deck. And again, at the cost of 2 Cyber Dragons, you know, that may not always be the most advantageous thing to do. You really have to be at a pinch. 2, Polymerization. So, of all the ways to make fusions, one of which is the old school classic polymerization. 1 copy of Pot of Greed. 2 copies of the Almighty Power Bond. So for anyone who doesn't know what Power Bond does, make a fusion type monster using cards in your hand or your field. Double its attack at the end of the turn, take damage equal to its original attack. So, yeah, double the attack of any fusion, and that becomes the attack too. It's not just a one-turn thing. And unlike limited removal, it's not destroyed, but you take life point damage. Again, as I kept saying, Cyber Kyrian is there for that. But if you don't have Cyber Kyrian, because, you know, even at 2 copies, because 3 was just, you know, would be a bit too much. There's always the good chance that you will need this card and not have Cyber Kyrian. So again, just play around very carefully that life point effect. It's great with Chimera attack because you can use 2 monsters on a Chimera attack. So you'll take 1,600 points of damage, but have a 3,200 attack Chimera attack that can attack 2 monsters. Depending on how you make a Chimera attack or a Cyber Twin, you will not take as much damage as, you know, a Cyber End. But again, you may not need to. You may win that turn. But it's a card. Definitely be careful to play around because if you can only use this to make a fusion, but you have enough life points to support it, you know, you're screwed. Alright. Ruthless Denial. Tribute a monster on your field, and then you can destroy a card in your opponent's hand. Or sorry, send it to the graveyard. So, kind of a cost there to send a whole monster on your field to send 1 card to the opponent's hand. Um, if you saw the Zane versus Chaz duel, that actually came in handy when Delta had my field locked out with the Ojama tokens. And because it says send into the graveyard, not just destroy a tribute monster on your field, I could not use it on said Ojama tokens. But regardless of that, overall, very heavy cost to effect ratio, but it has its moments. I proved that. And that's it for the spell cards. So the deck is overall cohesive. I would say that the Cyberdark one is definitely the stronger of the two, especially when the Cyberdarks are added to their anime effect that you can take a 4 or a 4-star or lower dragon instead of a 3-star lower dragon. Alright, trap time. 2 attack reflected units, so there's 2 copies of each card to make the 2 bigger, effectier Cyber Dragon variants. So this one's a trap card, so you can only activate it after a turn. The other one is a quick play spell, so you can make it, on that first turn you draw the card. But, again, only one Cyber Dragon, so it's a bit more cost effective than the other one, but you cannot take it from your graveyard. So, if you happen to have lost it already, you're not getting it back. 2, Call of the Haunted. So, again, a great way to recycle Cyber Dragons or the fusions or just whatever you need. Can help you with the barrier lasers. They really are very kind of like paperweights in the deck, that they're very specific summoning conditions. But regardless, you can use it on Cyber Twin. You can use it on and anything else. Damage Polarizer. It's the counter trap card to when an effect is activated that would inflict effect damage, negate the card, and then both players draw a card. Effect damage is not something that's highly rampant in our anime decks. Because it's not used a lot in the anime. Effect damage and monster removal, they're definitely there. I'm not saying they aren't, but they're not as widespread. Ring of Destruction, again, doesn't see a lot of play because it has to be effect damage, which is not the most abundant. Final Fusion. Now here's a card that does inflict effect damage. So, super boss card right here. And it basically works that when one of your fusions is battling an opponent's fusion monster, you negate the battle and both players take damage equal to the combined attack of both fusion monsters. And with GX decks, with all the fusions, this will probably end up in a draw or someone losing just because of how much attack there could be between the two of them. We're talking E-Heroes and Cyber Dragons, or some of the Roids and Cyber Dragons. If someone does lose from this effect, it'd be, incredible. So, super powerful card because it just does a lot of damage, but you have to have 2 fusions battling each other. So, it's a little bit trickier to pull off. Next up, Return Soul. This card was missing from the original deck profile. It's always been in Zane's deck, but for some reason it just got skipped out of the deck profile. So, you can only use it during the end phase, and you can return up to 3 monsters destroyed this turn from the graveyard to the owner's decks. So it can work to your opponent as well. Why you'd want to help them is interesting. But basically, it is, a great way to return monsters that you couldn't return anyway, other than another way, like a special summon. So if you need to put Barrier Laser back, you could return any of the fusions back to the fusion deck. It's probably the most advantageous way to use this. Or you can recycle Cyber Dragons, but they had to have been destroyed during the turn you activate this card, and not like Backup Soldier, where they could have been from any turn, but they'd have to be normal monsters. Last card is just Trap Jammer. So that's Zane's 40 card deck. You know, a lot of Cyber Dragons, a lot of fusion support. Fusion time. Chimera Attack over Dragon is like the god boss of the deck, in a lot of ways. Again, this we saw in Season 2, but it's still going to go in the Season 1 deck, because overall it was a Season 1 deck. Again, with cards unseen for various reasons, whether or not they were there and were unplayed until Season 2, or... Okay, so Chimera Attack over Dragon. Question. So, basically it's Cyber Dragon and any number of machine-type monsters. That makes it really powerful. The strongest thing about it is that you can vary that to what you need. You don't always have to just dump every monster. Now, that'd be great. You can dump like 10 monsters and give it 8,000 attack points. They can attack up to 8 monsters. So that's like 2 scapegoats. But the thing is, you may not always need that. There have been times I've been able to only use 2 materials or 3. But using a power bond, it makes it a lot stronger. It means you'll take some damage, but less if it was just 2 pieces. So we're talking 1600 attack is double to 3200. You take 1600 life point damage, like I said earlier. You have a 3200 attack monster that can attack twice. So that makes you just a tiny bit stronger than Cyber Twin Dragon. And you only would need 1 other machine and not 2 Cyber Dragons. Again, the downside is that it destroys everything on the field when it's summoned, but depending on your situation, there may not be any field to destroy. So next up is Zane's, the trump that we saw more of, really, which is his Cyber End Dragon, a fixed 4,000 attack, 2,800 defense, and can do piercing. That's really what it has going for it, is piercing. With 4,000 attack, is a lot of damage. But using it with Power Bond, especially in the anime, an 8,000 attack and piercing would always win Zane the duel. Here, it's not guaranteed the duel, but it's still a lot of damage, 8,000 piercing, or 8,000 and not piercing. It's still a lot of damage right there in this card. And at least if you Power Bond it in, a real duel with us, unless you're playing 4,000 life points, it's not going to kill you. It's going to be a lot of damage, but you'll still be in the game, and unless your opponent stop the attack, they're probably going to be on the losing end anyway. Last up is, because again, we see more fusions in Zane's Cyberdark Dragon deck. This one, it just has 3. So Cyber Twin Dragon, 2,800, 2,100. So it's interesting. His attack is, his big brother's defense points, Cyber End Dragon. His defense is the little brother's attack points, Cyber Dragon. So you kind of see the way the 1 dragon, 2 dragon, and 3 dragons kind of goes in attack defense. It's not really relevant to anything. I just think it's an interesting pattern that, the one's attack is the next one's defense, and then his next one's attack. So, really basic is 2 Cyber Dragons. You can only use Cyber Dragons to make him. Same thing with Cyber End, so you can't use any kind of fusion substitute. But you can, again, on the field, proto counts. So it's 2 Cyber Dragons, can attack twice. With 2,800, that is not bad. And it can just make 2 attacks, so it doesn't say it's only attack 2 monsters. So this one could attack a monster and then attack directly. And 2,800 makes it stronger than so many other monsters. That, this is actually easier to get out than Cyber End Dragon. And in a lot of cases is more handy because it can make twice as many attacks with still, a lot more attack points than you need for a lot of situations. It's kind of one of my main go-tos because you can just summon it really easily and do a lot of damage really quickly with it, making it actually really, really lethal. But so that's it. That is Zane's, season 1, 7 stars, Cyber Dragon deck. He brought a lot of them back later on. We saw in his Cyber Dark deck, especially his last with Jesse. We saw a lot more of the Cyber Dragons than we did some of the Cyber Darks. But a really cool archetype, a fairly strong archetype, and they've added a lot more to it in the TCG, but it's not stuff we saw Zane really play, but still a lot of cool additions as far as Cyber Dragons go to the overall archetype. So, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Always stay tuned because we're always dropping more content. Deck waves coming every couple months. So new decks are coming every couple months. So just keep watching for more. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe.